All right, hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over CSS Text Properties. Some of these you may have seen before in other places, but I wanted to kind of collect them all in one spot so you'd have kind of a handy dandy reference for CSS Text Properties. They're not all text either. Some of them are like margins and padding, which are can affect how text looks, but it's not really text itself. But yeah, so I thought I would give you guys like a rundown of the most commonly used CSS text properties. I'm going to give you this file. It's called CSS Text Properties Start. I think it's in a folder by itself probably, and I'll be nice and give that to you guys. And then there's a bunch of styles at the top, which you don't need to worry about. That's just formatting the page and some of the sections and things. You want to go down to where it says add your CSS here, and then we're going to just edit some of these class CSS rules. So class, remember, is the dot that tells you it's a class, and that kind of selector, right? And then if I go down to the different sections, they're each like a card, and then they have a live example section, and they all have one of those classes on it. So this one's called prop color. That's the first one. So the CSS and the HTML are already in there, except for we're going to add one line each. So hopefully it won't be too bad. Sorry, I sound a little nasal, and I might nasally, and more than usual. You're probably saying to yourself, and yeah, I might have a little cough. I have a little cough. I'm a little bit sick. I don't think you can catch it through the video. That would be crazy. I don't think that works that way, but it'll be news if it does. Okay, so the first one we're gonna do is color, which you've probably seen before. So it sets the color of text. It's a foreground color actually, but it's the color of text as opposed to background color. You can use color names, hex codes, RGB values. I want to make sure that I emphasized you want to have good contrast between text color and background color because it will hurt readability if you don't. So you may see this in another video as well, but if these are these little possible values for these different properties. If I right click on this and go to inspect, and then I click on the little color swatch right here, this is the color that I'm using for that. And then right down here, it says the contrast ratio, which is the ratio of the dark to light, like the Jedi and the Sith. I don't know, you guys are too young, but maybe not. So if I click on that little drop down, you can see it has a green check mark, AA and AAA. That's what I call it anyway, accessibility ratings. So that's okay. So that has enough contrast. So you do want to have that. You don't want a middle gray text on a middle gray background, that kind of thing. White text on a white background is super hard to read. Okay, so let's go into the actual code. I'll make this a tiny bit bigger just to make sure you guys can see it easily. So we're going to do the color, and that's just color, which makes sense, right? And then I'm going to do RGB. There's a lot of ways to do it, right? You can do it with hex code. You can do it with RGB values. You can do it with named colors, but nobody does that anymore really. And I'm going to put in 150, 0, 0, which is a kind of a dark red, right? So this text should change to a dark red. Oh, there you go. I'm pretty sure you've done that before. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's color. I think you've seen that before. You may have also seen font size. Sorry, this is redundant, but that's how big your text is, right? So you can use px pixel units, you can use em units, you can use root em units, you can use keyword sizes. 1 rem equals the browser's base font size, which is usually 16. So it's also em is usually 16. Em is relative and rem is not. It's not the band either if you guys like rem. But I digress. Let me put this in here and then you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to say font size, and I'm going to do 1.5 EM. So all that text got bigger, right? So it got 1.5, oops, I got an extra semicolon there. 1.5 times as big as it was before. So if I show you this, I'm going to have to scroll down for a second. I'll come back in a minute. I'm going to go down to font size, which is section 2. And I've got a span on the word larger right there. It just says span around the word larger right there. So I have a style for that. So this is a descendant selector which maybe you know that, maybe you don't. That means any span that's inside of this class. So I'm going to put the same exact thing on there, but it won't be the same size. So I put the same size on that span as I put on this, but since this is a relative unit, it ends up with a calculated value. What that means is this one is 1.5 times the size that it used to be. This one is 1.5 size that it used to be. So it used to be 150%. Now it's 150% times 150% was like what? 225%, something like that. If I put so what I wanted you to see was when you use EM units, it's going to multiply on itself. If you use a rem unit, it won't, right? So if I put rem on there, it goes back to the root, which is 1, which is the default size, and then multiplies from there. This will probably stay the same if I do that. Yeah. So just wanted you to see that. That's an interesting little effect. It's supposed to be relative, meaning it got relatively 1.5 times larger than the surrounding text or the text that was in effect. Hopefully that makes a tiny bit of sense. It even sounds weird to me when I say it. That's a bad sign, I guess. Okay, so we're going to do property font family. So this is font family. You've probably seen this one before as well. I'm going to paste this one in because I don't want to type this one and have you guys wait for me. I don't want to make sure I got what I wanted to get in. So I put in font family, and then I put Georgia, comma, Times New Roman, comma, Times, comma, serif. And that is showing this, right? So how does this work? This is called the font stack. The first choice is for Georgia. The second one is Times New Roman. There are quotes around Times New Roman or a single quote because if the name of the font has more than one word in it, it has to have a quote or a single quote around it. And then Times is the third choice. And then serif is a generic font style. That means it has serifs. So you've probably seen this before too, but if I zoom in here, serifs are the little extra part like around the G, the top of the G there, that little extra stroke around the top of the G, down the bottom of the A, down the bottom of the I. Those are called serifs. Sans serif means without. So sans means without. I think it's French. Very French. So, or maybe it's Latin. I should probably know that. Anyway, so when you're using font family, you are restricted to the fonts that are on the user's computer. Remember that. So if they have Georgia, they'll see that. If they don't, they'll see Times New Roman. If they don't, they'll see Times. And if they don't have any of those, they'll see just some serif font, which they will have. So that's called a font stack. You can use, and I think I put that in there. You can use custom web fonts, but that's in another video. So you can use Google Fonts or other types of custom web fonts that are basically downloaded to the user's computer, to their browser, to their computer. And then you can use those fonts, but that is a different process. And you're basically giving them a font to use. This is just assuming that you're using a font that's already on the computer. But like I said, that's a different video for web fonts. You'll have to watch that one separately. Okay, so the next one is font weight, which is the thickness. So weight is how it means like how dense, how thick is the font. So I'm going to say font weight and bold. And I want to make sure I didn't leave anything out, important stuff I was going to tell you guys. I think that's okay. So font weight. So this is now bold. Font weight sets the boldness of text. You can use keywords or you can use numbers from 100 to 900. It's not 100 and 101, 102. It's 100, 200, 300, etc. Normal is 400. Bold is 700. Sometimes it's 600, I think. Not all fonts support every numeric weight. Some only have a bold and a normal. Different fonts have different weights too. So it depends which font you're using. But all we did is put font weight bold. So pretty much every font has a bold. Not every font. A lot of fonts have a bold. A lot of display fonts, sort of decorative fonts, don't only have one version. So they wouldn't have a bold. But now you can see this is bold. I made sure to say don't make everything bold. If you make everything bold, then nothing is emphasized and then it's all emphasized. When everything is emphasized, nothing is emphasized. That's a kind of cliche, but it's true. And bold text is a tiny bit harder to read than regular text because it's denser and kind of blocky. So don't make your whole page bold. That's just not a great idea. Just as a little warning. Okay, so the next one is font style. So we're going to say font style oblique, which is not your muscle on the side of your torso. Well, that is your oblique, huh? But this is oblique text. So there's 2 values or 3 values for this one: normal, italic, and oblique. And italic is the italic version of the font. Oblique slants the normal font if there's no true italic version. Most of the fonts you're going to use, most of the fonts you're going to use are going to have an italic version, so you'll see that. So if you change this to, let's try it. Let's change this to italic. It looks exactly the same because this font has an italicized version, so it's the same one. But if it doesn't have one, it'll slant it to try to fake it. So that's what oblique is. I think that's it. Okay. The next one is text align. So we're going to do text align. We'll try a couple of them. We'll say text align. Let's do justify, which is a good series. Good Western. I think it's a Western. So there's 4 options, at least for this one: left, center, right, and justify. Left means the left side is flush and the right side is ragged. Centered means centered. Let's try centered. I'll show you what that means. You know what centered looks like, but they're centered, right? So centered is going to have what's called a ragged left margin, meaning it's not straight, and a ragged right margin. Left, which is the default, is a flush left margin and a ragged right margin. And why am I talking about this so much? Because it's really important for readability and design. And then if I go right, then the right side is flush and the left side is ragged. So this ragged left margin is problematic because what happens is, and it's not a huge deal, but it is a little bit of a deal. The viewer will get to the end of a line and then they have to go back and find the beginning of the next line, right? But if they're always in a different spot, it makes it a tiny, tiny bit harder. And it also feels a little bit chaotic. So you're going to use left aligned text like 97.6% of the time. I made that number up, but that's probably about right. Some people like to use center text a lot, but don't use it for body copy. So if I put center, if I could type center, there we go. Centered, right? We got those ragged margins, and it just has this sort of static feel too, and it's a little bit funky to read that way. So don't use centered unless it's a small, like headings is fine, small amounts of text is fine, but not like body copy. Body copy is the main text on the page. If I say justify, it makes flush left and right margins, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. But what happens here, especially if I get narrower, whoops, grab the wrong thing here. See, as I get narrower, these are called rivers, right? And then you'll get big weird spaces between the words because the browser usually doesn't hyphenate. It is possible to hyphenate, but you have to do it manually, I think. But you're going to get weird spacing between words, which does hurt readability and makes it look weird. So I would not use justify very often unless you really had a good reason for it. So you're going to use left most of the time, which is the default. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm trying to warn you guys off of using centered and right and justify, but you can, of course you can, but just be careful with it. The next one is text decoration. So I'm going to say text decoration. I'm going to say, and here's all the values: dash, dotted, double, line through. I'm going to go over line. So those values are in VS Code as well. So here is text decoration. So overline means it has a line over the top of it. Kind of weird. I don't really know what that's good for, to be honest. I just kind of like doing it. It's weird. So you can put none, underline, overline, line through. So if I go line through, which looks like strike through or deleted text, those all kind of look the same, but you can put a line through the middle of it. Let's do overline just for fun. Like I said, I don't know why you would do that. But underline or none So you can use none to take the underline off of a link, for example. So links are underlined by default. So you could say text decoration none on a link and it will turn it off, right? So a lot of people like to do that as long as the link looks like a link for some other reason, because the underline is an indicator to the viewer that it is a link, right? So you got to have something to tell them it's a link. For the same reason or similar reason, don't use underline on text. Like if I say underline here, now all this text is underlined. People might think that's a link because links are underlined by default. So be careful with that one as well. So I'm going to leave this as overline for no good reason. But there's also some other things you can do, but I'm not going to get into this. You could try some of these other things. You can make some styles and things. I think. I've never really done it, but okay. So property text transform. So the next one is transform. We're going to say text transform. And we're going to say, I think we're going to do uppercase. So that's this one here. So it changes the capitalization of text without editing the HTML. So that the text could be lowercase. If I comment that out, command / or control / it's commented out. There's the normal text, right? If I put in text transform uppercase, the whole thing is capitalized. But we didn't type anything different. It's just a style. So you can do none, uppercase, lowercase, capitalize. There are others as well, but that's the main ones. So why did that not work? Text transform, capitalize. There, no. All right, I meant to put uppercase. I was like, what's going on? Uppercase, not capitalize. So there's uppercase, right? That being said, you do not want to, just like you don't want to make a whole page of bold text, and I didn't mention this, but you don't want to make a whole page of italics text because they're harder to read. You don't want to make a whole page of uppercase text because it's harder to read. So if you think about it, if I turn this off for a second, words have shapes, right? So after you learn to read when you're a kid, right, you recognize the entire word as one sort of thing. You're not looking at every letter anymore when you start reading after a while. So they have different shapes, right? The caps there's capitalization, there's descenders, that's called a descender. There's ascenders, things that go above and below the line, and things like that. If you use everything uppercase, what's the shape of every letter? It is a rectangle, kind of, right? There's everything's at the top and everything's at the bottom. These words don't have really a shape anymore. They're just the letters. So it is a tiny bit tougher to read. So you don't want to do that. Plus, it looks like you're yelling, and you don't want to be rude and make people cry and things like that. So just use that. Maybe you could use that for buttons and things. I think I have that in here. You use it for headings or nav labels, buttons, things like that, but not for body copy, usually. Okay, the next one is, we're on number 9 we're about halfway done. Or maybe, yeah, halfway done. So letter spacing. So we're going to say letter spacing. Let's see, I'm going to go to 0.02 EM. And what did that do? We can do a little more. Let's do 4, just so you can see it. So what does that do? That increases the spacing between the letters. That's why it's called letter spacing. Wow, Mark, that's really impressive. So positive values spread letters apart, negative values bring them together. Works especially well in uppercase headings and labels. So you could do it on a little bit of text like headings and labels, but I would not do it again on body copy. You can also see that you can do negative. So if I do negative, let's do negative 0.6. You can see the letters will start to get really tight. You can even make them overlap. Let's do negative 0.1. See, they're starting to overlap, and that is not really great. So be very careful with letter spacing because you are changing. What do we want to go to? We want to go to 0.2. 0.2 is our final number. And be very careful with it because you are changing the default spacing. So when fonts are designed, they are designed to have a certain amount of space between each set of two letters. So an A next to a C has a certain amount of space, and a P next to an A has a certain amount of space. But if you start messing with that and add letter spacing to everything, you're kind of disrupting the rhythm of the font. So do it very carefully. Like I said, I wouldn't do it on body copy. You can do it on headings and some other things if you want, but not on large amounts of text because you are kind of disfiguring the font. I think it's illegal in 14 states, so be careful with that. Okay, the next one is line height, which is a big one. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say line height, and I think we're going to do 1.5. So you can use no units on there and it just becomes like a multiplier. So line height 1.5 means it's going to be 1.5 times as big as whatever was in effect. It's kind of like the EM thing before. So here's line height. Actually have line height on, I'm gonna go to the top for a second. There's line height on the whole page, 1.3. If I turn that off, then now it's default line height, which is 1, I think. And the lines get kind of tight. So it actually makes it a little dense, a tiny bit harder to read. So most of the time you will hear people say you should add a little bit of line height. It could be anywhere from like 1.4 to 1.7, depending on what you're doing. 1.5 is kind of typical. I think that's kind of a lot. So I did 1.3 on this page. I don't know. I'm just being radical, I guess. But definitely usually are going to add in some line height. So if I put 1.5, let's put 2 so you can see it. Let's just put 2 in there. There's line height. So I put 2. That's getting too much, right? So now it looks like, is this a separate paragraph or is this the same paragraph? So here's 1.5 again. That's kind of a lot, but it's okay. I don't think that looks like separate paragraphs there. Do you? I don't know, but that would probably be the max that I would go. But you will see people use up to like 1.7. Depends on the font too and where it is and some other things. All right, the next one is word spacing. So I'm going to say word spacing, which is not that useful, but I have it in here anyway. Word spacing, 0.5 EM. What does that do? It spreads out the words. Duh, right? So it doesn't spread the letters out inside the words, just between the words. So I added 0.5. Oops, I got an extra semicolon in there. I added 0.5 EM to the spacing between those words, and then they get kind of spread out. That's a lot, but I wanted you to be able to see it. Not used a whole lot, to be honest, but that's how that one works. The next one is text indent. So this is more like traditional printing style typography for like long form books, like novels and things. We'll have a text indent. I'm going to say 3 EM. And there you go. So that just, all it does is indent the first line of the text. So I don't know if you guys have ever read a book. Are books still in existence when you're seeing this video? Probably not. But a lot of times in books, in traditional typography, like it says, the first line of a paragraph might be indented. Not on the web very often. Sometimes, but not very often. So you don't see it a whole lot, but that is how you do it. Text indent, and then you add a value in there. This next one is kind of fun. This is called text shadow. So you can add a shadow. It used to be called, well, it's still called a drop shadow. Drop shadow is a shadow underneath something that sort of makes it 3D, kind of looks like it's coming off the screen or the page. Used to be we'd have to do it in Photoshop, and it took a bunch of work, and now it's just a little piece of code. So I'm going to paste this one in too because I don't want to have you guys watch me type this for a while, but you can type it. You can pause the video too anytime you want and type it. So we've got text shadow, that's the property. Then you've got, so here's the syntax. It's the horizontal offset, then the vertical offset, then the blur radius, then the color. So horizontal offset means left and right. So 3 pixels means the shadow is going to go 3 pixels to the right. 3 pixels on the second one means it's going to go 3 pixels down. So for some reason, positive numbers are right and down, negative numbers are left and up. If I put a -3 here, see the shadow is now going up. Yeah. So that's the X and Y values, right? So 3 and 3 means 3 over and 3 down. And then the 3 pixel there is a blur. If I put 0 there, you'll see it'll be like a hard edge shadow. You guys see that? Which usually isn't that great. So I'm going to put 3 on that one. You can obviously adjust any of these. And then I like to do text shadows with RGBA. Remember, RGBA is red, green, black, and alpha, which is transparency. So I have a black shadow, but it's semi-transparent, meaning, so it's 0.3, which means it's 30% opaque. If I change this to 0.9, then it's yeah, you don't want that. That's barely readable, right? So when you have a RGBA, and then you have a low number there, then the background of the page, which is not white, it's close to white, whatever this color is here, shows through the shadow. So you can do that if you want. You don't have to, but that's what I do sometimes. Okay, so that was text shadow. That's pretty fun. Don't overuse it. It can make text hard to read. You don't want to use it on body copy. A lot of these rules are like for headings only, but not for body copy. Or a lot of these things are useful on headings, but not body copy. All right, the next one is font variant. Not used a whole lot, but it's kind of fun, I guess. So we're going to say font variant, and we're going to go small caps. And what that does is it makes each capital letter gets bigger, and every other letter is also caps, but it's slightly smaller. So everything's capitalized, but the actually capitalized words are full cap height. And then the rest of them are X height, I think, like they're lowercase. Let me just turn this off and you'll see what it looked like before. That's what it looked like before, just normal text, right? Now every word that was capitalized is still capitalized, but every letter that was not caps is caps. I don't know, I think it looks kind of cool, actually. So that's called small caps. Not used a whole lot, but interesting. The next one is, we have 4 more. White space. So I'm going to say white space, and that's this one. So here's the text that we're modifying, and you'll see it'll look completely different when I say white space pre. Oh, pre's not on there. It should be on there. White space pre. So that's short for pre-formatted. So when you say white space pre, then the browser it renders the text the same as it is in the actual code. So I'm going to go down and show you section, 15 again real quick. 17, 16, 15. So here's how this is typed. You can see it has a bunch of extra tabs in there and line breaks and things. So normally the browser ignores any extra tabs or spaces, right? It sees one space and that's it, but it ignores the rest. But if you say white space pre, it will not ignore it and it will type it. It'll render it the same. Now we got to find where I was, right here. It'll render it the same as it's typed in your code, actually. So a lot of people think, oh, this is great. I can format a whole page in pre and it'll be great. It does have problems like not wrapping text when it needs to wrap and responsive layout issues on small screens because it's just going to be like this no matter what. So what if your page gets small enough so that it doesn't fit? It's going to side scroll. It's just not going to work. So normally you want text to wrap normally, but for limited use, you could use white space pre or some of the other ones. There's also no wrap. If you don't want it to wrap at all, it won't wrap. Let's see if this actually works on this. So no wrap means it will not wrap at all, no matter what. So what is it doing? It's actually going outside the container. Doesn't care what it's in. It's just going to keep going. I don't care. So yeah, that's problematic too, but that is a possibility. So that's something here you wouldn't use it, but you could use it, in other situations. Yeah, so those are a couple of the uses for that. The font shorthand. So this one I'm going to paste into because I don't want to have you guys watch me type it, and then I'll explain it because it's a little tricky. This one is a little tricky. So this is the font shorthand. So the font shorthand is a way to do a bunch of things at once. So I could do font style, font variant, font weight, font size, line height, and font family, all as separate lines in the CSS, right? We've already seen that. We did that up above. But if you want to use the shorthand, you can just use font. So you don't use font family or anything like that. You just say font, and then you can stack all these together and do them all at once. So what we're seeing here with this one is we're seeing font style is italic, font weight is 600. This is a weird one too. This is the font size, and this is the line height or leading. And I forgot to mention, I did forget to mention. We said line height earlier is the space between the lines, the baselines of the text, the space between the lines. The typographic name for that is leading. And it comes from the olden days when they used strips of lead between text lines to space them. So that's why it's called leading. There you go. That'll fascinate somebody at a party. So we got the font style, we've got the font weight, we've got the font size, we've got the leading or the line height, and then we've got the font family. So all 5 of those. There's actually, you can add another one too. You could have added font variant in there, but I didn't. So if you look at this, that's the same as writing like all these separately, but it's all in once. So this is now italics, 600 is bold, it's 1.1 size, the line height is 1.3, the font is Verdana, and sans serif is a backup. So it does some weird stuff if you leave things out. So there are some restrictions. Font style, variant, and weight are optional, and it can appear in any order. The line height is also optional, but it has to be immediately after font size. So there are some restrictions in the order of that. But yeah, it saves you a little typing. All right, last 2 are margin and padding. You've probably seen this before, but it does make sense to show it here because it does affect, margin and padding does affect how things look. And I'm gonna look up CSS box model for the 30th time here because I want to show you, make sure you guys know what I'm talking about with margins and padding. I can actually show you by inspecting, can't I? Yeah, I'll go here. So inside the inspector, like if I right click and inspect and I go scroll down here, there is the CSS box model. So you got the content in the middle, you got the padding outside of that, that's space between the content and the border. And then outside the border, you got a margin. So all this is optional. Padding, border, and margin are optional. Content's kind of not optional, I guess. But so why am I talking about this? Because it will change how the text is rendered, like where it's rendered. Let's put it that way. So I'm going to go in and go margin 10 pixels just for the fun of it. So now what happened? It pushed in. So margin is space outside the box, right? So it pushed this blue box in 10 pixels. If I do 20, you'll see more. 20. So see how it's pushing in? It's pushing space here, 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 and here. So you can do this. I could do this way. I can go 10 pixels there. And you may have seen this somewhere else, but I'm going to show you again. If I put 2 numbers in, then the first number is the top and the second number is the right. If there's any missing numbers, the opposite side is the same. What does that mean? So if I put 20, it's 20 and 10, right? So if I put 20 and 10, it's 20 there, it's 10 there. Since this is 20, this is 20. Since this is 10, this is 10. If you put 3 numbers like some sort of a crazy person, then it's going to be 20, 10, 5, and back to 10, because that one's missing. So whatever number is missing, you just go to the opposite side. If I put 20, just 20, if I put 4 numbers, it's 4 sides. This is 20, 10, 5, 30. So you can do them all separate, or you can do them all together. This is also a shorthand. You could also write this as margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left, but this is the shorthand. If I only put 1 number, It's all the way around. All right, so that's good on that. It works the same as far as the shorthand for padding, but padding is not the space outside the box, it's inside the box, so I'll put in padding of 10 pixels. And then this one now has padding. So that's the space, that's this space right here, the space between the content and the border. So the reason I put that in here partly is because when you're formatting your page and you have text on the page, if you have a background color, you don't want that usually. So if you don't have any padding on that box and it has a background color and or a border, then the text is cramped right up against the edge of it. Just feels, it needs some breathing space. It needs some room, man. It needs some room. So you want a little bit of padding in there usually. If I didn't have a background color, it wouldn't matter. But I do have a background color, so it does matter. Oh, and a border, or a border. So padding is your friend to make a little bit of space, right? If you get a package from Amazon, it comes with the bubble wrap, which is the padding, and that's the fun part anyway. Better than whatever you bought. I think that is it. Sorry if that was pretty fast. You could put it on, 3/4 speed playback if you want, and I'll sound really slow. But I think that's about it. Hopefully that helped a little bit with text formatting, and I will talk to you again later.